Before we jump in, we are starting the afternoon with the presentation of 2 awards. The first one is the Employee Engagement Award. This award is presented to one organization. The Employee Engagement Award recognizes a company's involvement in conservation through the sheer force of its employee teams who participate in its habitat and conservation education activities. I'm really pleased to present this year's Employee Engagement Award to DTE Energy. DTE Energy reported an impressive number of employee hours dedicated to planning and implementation of conservation and education work during the past year. DTE employees have put in a total of over 8,000 hours in the past few years across 21 certified programs. Here to accept the award for DTE Energy and also a panelist for us today is Kristen LeForce.
Hi, Josiane.
Hi, Kristen.
So thank you so much, and thanks to the Wildlife Habitat Council. It's a huge honor to accept this award on behalf of everyone at DTE, from the folks here in Detroit to our teams throughout Greater Michigan and beyond. I'm privileged to work alongside some of the most dedicated, inspiring, and passionate people at DTE. My colleagues continue to grow our wildlife habitat efforts year after year, continuously improving how we operate as a company and looking for new ways to do more or to be better stewards for the environment. Our employees are the backbone of our environmental efforts at DTE, and we would not be who we are without them. I'm also very lucky to work for a company that prioritizes not only the environment, but its employees' desires to enhance and restore the properties that we go to work at each day. The support for employee engagement through the Wildlife Habitat Program comes directly from our leadership, and that engagement can be found within every department at DTE. From the line workers who install osprey nesting platforms and invent new tools to safely move nests off of power lines, to the plant personnel who coordinate and host school groups at our sites, leading bird and nature walks, or the project planning committee who analyze each and every project for opportunities to include wildlife habitat or green infrastructure elements. Our work is far from done. DTE will continue in its commitment and actions to be environmental champions through fruitful partnerships with Wildlife Habitat Council and other organizations that want to partner with us in this mission. Again, thank you for this tremendous honor.
Thank you, Kristen, for these words, and congratulations again to DTE. And we will see you back on our virtual stage in just a few minutes. Next, we will present the 2020 WHC Gold Program of the Year Award. This award recognizes the overall depth of one exceptional program in the Gold certified tier. And the winner this year is Fidelity Investment, Smithfield, Rhode Island. The Smithfield program contains 10 qualifying projects, ranging from management of an acre of landscaped habitat, 20 acres of grassland, and 400 acres of forest, all the way to controlling invasive vegetation and managing for species such as eastern bluebirds, tree swallows, wild turkeys, and pollinators. This facility, which spans across 525 acres in Rhode Island, also engages employees and community members in education about the site's wildlife species. You may remember the team as the winner of the Forest Habitat Award yesterday. And here to accept the award is Shannon Vader, Assistant Manager for Facilities, CBRE. Shannon, are you here?
Hi, yes. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. This is such an honor. What an amazing award. Fidelity Investment started the conservation program in 2006, and I came on board 8 years ago, and at the time it was called the Wildlife at Work program, and my manager gave me the opportunity to develop the program. And I quickly attended many of the WHC trainings and conferences to find out how we can grow our program. And now today we have 11 projects, as you mentioned, and one of which is our beautiful pollinator garden on campus. We allow our program, which is totally volunteer driven, to give the associates the opportunity to engage with nature while performing critical conservation efforts. We also focus on education for the employees as well as community members. We recently joined forces with our Rhode Island sustainability team within Fidelity to expand the opportunities that we give to the employees, and that is working out great. We look forward to getting employees back in the office and working with us again. Another focus is the development of certified programs across different Fidelity locations. We recently have one of our locations, Merrimack, New Hampshire, received certification. So I wanted to send a shout out to my colleague, Judy Morrissey, who is on this conference for her hard work and dedication in developing her program. And we are so thrilled to have another certified location. So the possibilities are endless, and we will continue our conservation efforts in the future. But thank you very much. I'm honored to receive this award.
Shannon, it's always great to see you. Thank you so much for your dedication to the program and to starting new programs with Fidelity. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Now back to our panel. Nature-based solutions. When we hear the term, we may think of a variety of clever green infrastructure and climate adaptation strategies. But nature-based solutions also apply to employee engagement, how each of us sees ourselves in the workplace, the pride we feel towards the entity we work for, the individual contribution we can make to help ensure a better tomorrow. All of it comes into play to attract and retain good talent in the workplace. So today, to help us navigate the connection between employee engagement and conservation projects, we have assembled a panel of true experts. You've seen her already. Kristen LeForce is a staff engineer in the environmental group at DTE Energy. She's also a central point of contact for WHC programs within the company. She will be joined by McShane, the assistant plant manager at Covia's Nepheline Syenite operations in an absolutely beautiful part of Ontario, Canada. Our third panelist, Jaime Kirsch, a service advisor for Bayer Crop Science, has an emergent meeting she has to attend and will join us as soon as possible. So panelists, welcome. Hi, Shane.
Hi there, how are you?
And Kristen, we'll get you back as well. Here you are. Well, to both of you, welcome. Thank you for accepting our invitation. To get started, I think it would be great to get a picture of what conservation looks like in your company or at your facility. And Kristen, as our award recipient, would you do the honors?
Sure. You can hear me all right, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So at DTE, we have 36 certified sites within the state of Michigan. We're headquartered in Detroit, but we have sites that are as far-reaching as Kingsford, Michigan, which is, as I like to joke and say, basically Wisconsin. But we got our first certification in the 90s with our Bell River Power Plant, which is on the St. Clair River. And we've since expanded our network of certified sites to include all of our power plants, as well as most of our natural gas distribution service centers and natural gas compressor stations, as well as some electrical distribution centers, and then our office buildings, like our downtown headquarters in Detroit and our Ann Arbor offices. So those are kind of our existing, what we've had happening for a long time. They've really been the established programs, but as we've grown and as DTE has grown, we're starting to look at, we're building a new natural gas plant. So we're looking to get that certified. Once that's, complete, we're really expanding in renewables like solar and wind. So a lot of our solar sites, we've done a lot of pollinator projects there already, and we're looking at what does certification mean for solar sites and how would that look. So DT is really changing its portfolio, and we're kind of changing with it. Like, how do we create more habitat as we change as a company? And so this way of thinking about biodiversity has really evolved since then. You know, this idea of being green or doing environmental friendly business practices has really expanded and evolved. And now we're looking at, you know, we have a team at DTE, Josiane, I know you've met a lot of them, who look at every single project that comes through, and whether those are IT projects where there are no habitat opportunities to rights of way or new buildings where we can look at from the ground up, looking and saying, well, let's seed this way, or let's do this a retention basin, but let's make it a wetland. And so really looking at everything we do and trying to figure out how we can do it better.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who really wants to ask you, how to make that evolve, right? Was it a champion who kept talking about it over and over again, or is it the leadership's culture was very much focused on environment? Because that's quite a shift from kind of the ad hoc projects 20 years ago to now having it completely integrated into operations.
Yeah, so I'd say it's kind of a little bit of both, not to, play both sides, but we definitely have had some very passionate champions, and some of those people have retired and some of those people are still with the company, but they've constantly been, pushing this and convincing people on the ground that this was important. But we also have a great culture at DTE of environmental stewardship, and our leaders understand that this is the future, that this is the way that we should be looking at our properties. We are a huge landowner, and it's not just enough to own land, but what is the responsibility that we have as a business owner to make sure that we're leaving the least amount of, we're leaving a better footprint, so to speak, than we might have previously. So for the next generation, what are we leaving behind? What are we creating? Especially as we build more solar sites. We're going to be investing heavily in solar and wind, and what does that look like? So I think having great leadership that are very future driven and very future focused, as well as having champions that can then do the work, right, and bring people along with them.
Thanks, Kristen. And I wrote a note down to get back on maybe some of the specifics of mainstreaming biodiversity. So Shane, what about conservation efforts at your facility, which is a mining operations, correct?
Correct, and just a little brief history. So the ore body was discovered at the turn of the last century, and then we've been in continuous operation for approximately 85 years here. And as you said, a beautiful part of Ontario, Canada, very wild and somewhat remote. Through those years, Covia itself has been certified, WEC certified for about 30 years, I guess, and NSO, or Nepheline Syenite operation, or NSO as we call it, has been certified for about 20 plus years now. As far as activities at the site, turtles are a big focus for us, and that's very specific. We have blandings and we have painted, and obviously we have snapping as well. Folks every year, early in June, May and June, conduct turtle surveys. So we have teams of folks that go out every evening for a period of a month, 6 weeks, and they catalog and they help the turtles to maintain their protection, because obviously with vehicular traffic that can be a problem. So turtle surveys is a big deal. That morphed itself over the years from just observing the turtles to actually harvesting the eggs, and then a full-blown incubation program that we do here. So as I say, turtles is a big focus. Wood duck boxes, the creation of them and the placement throughout the wetlands, that's a big focus for us here. And then the education piece, and I know someone mentioned it earlier today, universities, master's degrees, PhDs, we've supported in the past as well. So that would be the main focus areas here at NSO.
And how big is the property or your operations, to give us a sense of scale?
Well, the number would be approximately 3,500 acres. So we would span approximately 10 kilometers, 5 or 6 miles north to south generally, and we're surrounded with wetlands. We have wetlands on the site, and then we mine the Nepheline Syenite ore body at the north end. And if you were to view it from space or on Google Earth, you would see something that would look like a popsicle. So we're at the top of the popsicle at the north end. That's where we heavily mine. And then the actual spine or the stick of the popsicle is the ore body. So it's a huge, pure ore body.
I feel it's the size of a small city, just the sheer scope of the operations, but also of your projects, because you've been a long-standing certified program. So we've gotten to know a lot of what you're doing, and I know it's incredibly impressive and very science-based. So just another question for you, Shane. Because you operate in Ontario, where there's a real expectation, I think, from the population that corporations will demonstrate a really high level of commitment to social responsibility. So are you finding that new employees coming in are expecting something like that, or are they wanting to themselves take part in that nature-based engagement? Like, where does that stand in kind of expectation versus individual participation?
So that's a big question. I think that new employees coming in are very surprised when they join Covia and join us at NSO, how involved we are in the participation with WEC, certainly, and our environment. A lot of folks that work here, live local. No, we don't have, this is not a mine camp, so we don't have folks that stay here, but they live local, within, 20 kilometers. They're very aware of the region that we live in and the species at risk, the hunting piece, the angling piece. So I think, to answer your question, when they join, they're surprised that the company is so on board and it's driven, but then they also want to be participants. And so when we ask for volunteers, we don't have any problems.
You don't have to volunteer people to participate in the programs. That's always good. So I want to take just a quick second. Jami, thank you for joining us. I know you had some conflicts, but we're happy to have you. I want to take a quick second to mention that you're a service advisor for Bayer Crop Science in crop protection seed growth, but you're also, for Bayer, our WHC coordinator. You're the one person that we go to for all things Bayer.
Yeah, that is correct. And I have to apologize. I think it's probably fitting during this time of COVID that I would experience some technical difficulties on the day that I'm supposed to be a panelist. So I apologize for my tardiness, but I think I have it all worked out. Yeah, so this is a role that I fulfill outside of my real role at Bayer, but it's something that I have a passion for, and I think just through a strong network of individuals, it led me to the opportunity to be able to be part of what the Habitat Council is doing at Bayer, and then even more so expanding that into bringing Monsanto and Bayer together, and then what does that look like as far as the support from myself and my partnership with WHC.
So how does that fit together? The conservation landscape on the two sides of the new company, is it similar in terms of what conservation focus you're finding?
It's very similar, and I think that we were fortunate in that both sides of both legacy companies are driven not just in innovation, but also in biodiversity, restoration and protection. So, it was a very simple transition. It didn't, I think, it doesn't take much to convince others to jump on board. And we have other sites and programs within Bayer that could easily fit into the model that WHC has for programs and for certification. So I think it still leaves a lot of opportunity for other sites to be able to join the efforts that the Habitat Council is doing within Bayer, and expanding that to not just crop science, but also consumer health and pharmaceuticals.
That's a big reach, certainly. Many different ecosystems, many different people, because you have a big employee workforce. So it'll be interesting to hear how you're strategizing on all fronts. Kristen, if I can ask you, you mentioned in your introduction that you have programs in all types of facilities, whether generation, you have them at service centers, at your headquarters. So are there different strategies for the different business units and how you engage employees, or are you using the same blueprint?
I would say in a lot of ways, we use the same blueprint, which is just to find engaged folks at sites and rely a lot on our structure, which is, wrapping wildlife habitat up into ISO, having regular cross-functional team meetings where we can talk about wildlife habitat, and really, relying on project champions to continue to champion that, especially if we have new sites who are interested. Maybe we hook them up with the other gas sites or the regional meetings. We have a regional meeting and everybody's allowed to share all their projects and things like that. So really, maybe all the gas sites meet with each other and talk with each other, and the power plants talk to each other, and they have management, top management review meetings. So kind of breaking it up like that, where the gas sites can share best practices that they have and opportunities for improvement and things like that. A lot of it comes down to maybe size of sites. Our power plants are huge. They have a lot more opportunities to do big, large scale projects that have, huge impacts, and a lot of, they're a lot, I guess, more showy because they're huge. But the little sites, they have a lot less opportunities. So they have, smaller budgets, smaller land sizes. So they've really got to be creative. So allowing them to share ideas with each other, and helping them with ideas for small sites, using what they've got. And a lot of times, if they back up to a wetland or a forest, how can we use that? But really, yeah, it mostly comes down to size and trying to figure out what works best for different size sites.
So this is not the first time that I hear this model of almost mentorship between sites and between leaders. Jamie, I think you guys are also doing something similar.
Yeah, so we are kind of riding on the coattails of a successful 2019. Our sites really stepped up last year, and in fact, we had several nominated sites, and then Bear achieving the corporate leadership award. So we wanted to really build on that momentum, and early on in 2020 developed a strong network using the tools that we already had. So using Yammer, using different social media platforms to be able to drive attention to the successes that our programs have already seen, which initially built a lot of interest in, hey, what can we be doing at our location? So starting in January, we tried to pull together a monthly meeting of the minds, spotlighting a specific program and allowing that site to share with them their successes, their challenges, and then the next month we featured a new site. And so we were chugging right along, continuing that until I think March, and that's kind of when everything came to a halt. But at the same time, we still have a lot of interest in what our sites are doing. And just like some of the other presenters, we're establishing those champions at those locations and using them in partnership with these other sites that are maybe not as familiar with the program or just getting kind of an interest in it. So yeah, really just working with what you have as far as a strong network of individuals that share that same passion.
I think that will be a key takeaway for any team, in attendance today, looking to either improve how they're doing, what they're doing, or start new programs. That mentorship seems to be so important. For you, Shane, I'm wondering, you have a big site, you have a large workforce. Is everyone engaged or everyone allowed to engage in the conservation programs? How does that work with such a big workforce?
Yeah, it is a big workforce. We've got approximately 220, and we swell up to about 230 or 40 in the summertime when we're busy. Yeah, everyone's encouraged to participate in any way they can. Obviously, we have teams that we form and we focus on specific projects, as we mentioned before. But everyone is engaged every day. When we live and work here, you can see it. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to travel on the haul road and see a fully loaded haul truck with a burly big miner driving it stopped as a turtle walks across the road, or some birds or snakes or something else. So everyone is engaged from that perspective, maybe not in specific projects, but everyone's very, very well aware and educated on our efforts here.
Are the projects and the activities mostly occurring during their work time or after work or on the weekends, you know, within your groups?
So a little bit of both. I mean, we have both unionized and non-unionized staff here on the site. We have two different unions, and we work with both union leaderships to make sure that everyone gets a fair chance to do the work that needs to get done. And we also have volunteer pieces as well that we work with the unions. The staff members will participate as well alongside our union membership. So it's a good, you know, it's a good cohesive match, I find.
That's interesting as well. So we often hear that the programs need to be done by salaried employees rather than union employees because it creates too many conflicts, but you haven't seen that being an issue at your sites, even more so dealing with two different unions.
Yeah, certainly. With all union negotiations, you have to be transparent and open, and you have to continue to work with the leadership to maintain that good relationship. So yeah, we just continue to work through it. If specific projects come up, we make them aware of what we're trying to do, and they're usually on board, and then we work together to figure out who's going to do it.
So before my next question, we did get a really good question from the audience. Michelle, thank you for submitting. Michelle is asking, and we'll do this as a quick round, how are your projects, all of your engagement between the employees and nature, how is that funded? So Shane, for you, how is this all funded?
So we're led from the top down. Campbell Jones is our COO, our Chief Operating Officer, a fantastic man, a great leader. I spent time at the last WEC conference with Campbell. So from the top down, Campbell supports and drives this, which is great to have that top level support. There is no budget. So we take these projects on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we're running a business, so we look at these things, but we're not hemmed into a budget or restricted, to be honest with you.
That's really interesting. It's a good answer, and also maybe a bad one. You don't have a budget? That's concerning. Kristen, what about you? Is there a budget that comes with being able to engage employees with nature?
Yeah, so similar to what Shane said, it does come from the top down. DTE is such a large company, and we have so many different business units who are doing wildlife habitat projects. So a lot of times those specific funds come from that specific business unit. So if it's a gas site, that fee will come out of gas. If it's a electric generation, that'll come out of electric generation, renewables, et cetera. But if I ever have issue, if I need more money or something, I can always go and find it somewhere. But usually each business unit sets aside a certain budget for the year, looking at maintenance that they already have to do, as well as if they want to do new projects. And since we have so many sites, maybe they're not all doing new projects every single year, there's a budget that they can, dip into when needed, that is set aside separately from the budget for certifications and things like that.
Great, thank you, Kristen. And for you, Jami at Bear, how do you fund that engagement, nature and employees?
So it's very similar to Kristen and Shane. So it definitely is a top-down effect, and I think we really leave it up to those locations to determine how much they're wanting to invest into their projects. And I will have to say that many of our sites have become extremely resourceful in reaching out to other partners within their geography or within that project focus. So whether it's the Department of Renewable Resources or if it's the local conservation department, connecting with the local arborists, a lot of those tasks and maintenance can be done with a local partnership. But we encourage them, if you don't know, just ask, and there's no harm in asking for more. Now again, it's going to be top down, and we just have to work with what we have, but we've been really fortunate that we've had a lot of support within leadership.
Yeah, Jami, the worst they can always say is no, is what I say. They can always say no, but that's the worst thing they're going to say. So
it's really good advice, I think. And there's also ways to engage employees and start programs at almost zero cost as well, to get started. And that usually grows into something bigger once employees get a lot of visibility, the program or the project gets some recognition in the community, and then it's so much easier then to go and get additional funding for these efforts. I want to ask you, Jami, in particular, you have global programs all the way as far as south as Argentina, I think this year. That was one of the programs we work with. So in terms of strategy or tools and tactics to engage employees, do you have to do different things in different countries to be able to get the same level of engagement?
So not necessarily. I feel that we've got a strong network of individuals that are already participating in maybe not the Habitat Council's efforts, but maybe as part of our net impact group. And so it's got a fairly wide reach. And so the immediate strategy when someone reaches out to me with showing an interest in starting a project or getting more understanding of what that certification means, I am fortunate that I've got a group of individuals that I can go to that can help overcome some barriers, whether it's cultural or if it's the communication barrier. We've got a wonderful support system that can help us communicate or answer questions. And of course, we're always relying on the wonderful support of the Habitat Council themselves. And so having that relationship and that back and forth, transparent communication with them is always helpful too.
So basically, the framework can be adapted to different cultures and different locations.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, the focus is primarily the same regardless of where you're at. So whether it's a pollinator habitat in the Netherlands or in Hawaii or in Iowa, the end game is similar. Your primary goal is going to be the same. I think the only thing that you really need to take into consideration is, again, those, cultural or language barriers that you might have to face. So.
Thank you. That's really thoughtful. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, and Shane, I'll point to you first because you seem to be the only one in your office. So how has the pandemic impacted your employees' ability to connect with nature and either continue to do what they were doing or at least experience it while they're on site?
Well, first I'll start on sort of the downside. The visits to our site had to stop. So unfortunately, children on buses showing up and our employees touring them around the site, that unfortunately had to stop this year. Universities and colleges as well, and some of the other education outreach projects that we run. So that's quite sad because that's a big part of engagement when we get folks to give tours, and they really love doing it, both to showcase where we work and also what we do. On the positive side, we found that for the turtle surveys, we had more people volunteer. And I would venture that could be folks wanted to get outside. I mean, through April, March, June, that time frame when people were feeling a little bit cooped up, even though we were working here all the way through the pandemic and haven't stopped, I think folks just wanted to get outside and watch the turtles and help out in that way. Another piece, we usually had teams in previous years. We go out in teams in the evening of 2 usually per truck. We had to limit that to 1. So although you lost your partner, then you had to do all of the work. So still doing it.
So adapting to the conditions. But by the way, thank you for all of the work and staying at the office and keeping everything open. And that also, Kristen, same, you have a lot of essential workers within DTE. Did they take over taking care of all of the conservation projects while the rest of the workforce is working from home?
Yeah, I actually had quite a few stories of people who, I was talking to and they'd say, oh yeah, I had the operations guy go take some pictures for me real quick, or I had him check on the bird boxes because I can't. Or I had employees who, once we had gotten permission to go back a little bit, would go say, we're not going to go on in the building, or just need to go take pictures and go do some monitoring of our garden, and we got to do some weeding. So really just relying on maybe folks who weren't as involved, and trying to get them more involved. And hopefully that, continues in the future if we can, harness that. But, relying on the tools that we had. And if we can come in one day or something just to do some maintenance or to take some pictures, trying to work around all that. But I also had a lot of employees who reached out to me about, how do I get plants? I want to do a garden in my backyard or something. What's a local place I can get plants from or shrubs from, and trying to create a little bit of nature at home, and helping them find resources, whether that's a local nursery or a watershed group who have plants to sell for the communities. People just, like Shane said, I think cooped up a little bit.
Well, we hear from some of the scientific research that all we need as an individual is 120 minutes of exposure to the outdoors per week to feel the full breadth of the wellness benefits. So, and it can be 10 outings of 12 minutes, or one long exposure. But I'm really encouraged to hear that employees are wanting to emulate the DTE commitment in their backyards or on their balconies. I think that's really neat. And what about your workforce, Jami? Were folks still at the sites, especially on the crop side?
So fortunately, our crop locations and our crop sites and our breeding sites were deemed essential. So although probably at a limited number of employees, there were still individuals at that site that were able to carry on some of the monitoring and just being able to engage in nature while they're at work. Now our main headquarter location in St. Louis was on complete lockdown. So, you're talking about 4,000 employees that were sent home in March and haven't been back since. So, we would do what we could to engage people to get outside. I mean, obviously all of us, I think after sitting inside, even just for a few hours are itching to get outside. So it was nice to be able to see people posting those engagements on like our Yammer page, or just through the network of sites that we have, and posting pictures of, hey, here's some monarchs that I see in my backyard, or here's a fox and here's a snake. So we were getting a lot of just backyard nature moments, which I think is fantastic, because it just means that we're able to step away and take a break and get out of it, because it's very hard when we're working at home to define that line between work and home. I mean, everything is there together. So, just a constant reminder, even within my own team, to take whatever time you can to get outside, go for a walk, go for a hike, just sit out there and enjoy it, and be able to be on calls with individuals and hear them. Obviously they're either sitting outside or they have a window open, you can hear birds chirping. So, I think it's been a challenge, but at the same time, I think it's afforded us a luxury to be able to walk outside and be in just our community and our neighborhood. If we're out at a site, to be able to just take that time to be out there in nature. So it's been both a burden and a challenge, but I think I think we're up to the challenge. We want to be able to continue to engage people to get outside, because we don't know when we're going to be able to get back on campus at this point.
And I have to say, it puts a smile on everyone's face when you log into a team meeting and people are sharing their screens and a few of them are outside. Then it's just, even for whoever is not, outside, it's a nice feeling. Jami, you just mentioned Yammer, and I know that within your strategies to not only engage employees, but maintain that engagement, you do a lot of communication. So you've mentioned Yammer, you've mentioned the spotlight. Did that continue throughout the past 6 months, and are you seeing it change at all to meet different needs as we emerge from this new normal?
Yeah, no, it's definitely continued, and if not, I would even say that it's continued more, because I think it's important to redirect people's focus onto those positive things. Like anytime we get notification that a site's been recertified or a new site has achieved certification, one of the first things I do is post a big congrats and thank you on our Yammer page. And that's not just going to other Habitat Council sites, that's going to just individuals that are interested in biodiversity and pollinator habitat. So, you know, it could be somebody outside of that network, but just someone that shares that interest. So not only are they seeing the hard work that's being accomplished, but it's also providing a well-deserved recognition for that group as well. So, you know, obviously, and even before, we're not all at the same location. So we really have to rely strongly on the technology resources that we have to be able to stay connected. So and it's an easy go-to, and it's, you know, it can be just a fun way to engage others as well and encourage communication between different locations.
In a really social manner, not so much formal. That's really interesting. You mentioned something, Jamie, and I want to ask Shane about it. You mentioned the merger of Monsanto and Bayer and the new culture that emerged. And Shane, you went through a mergers and acquisition not too long ago as well, from Unimin to Covia. And do you feel that the connection that the employees had with the programs is one of the reasons that the programs were able to stay and not be kind of a casualty of the merger and acquisition process?
Yeah, interestingly, so the merger of Fairmont Central and Unimin to form Covia, as you said, we did go through. It didn't affect locally one drumbeat at all with the WEC and all the focus that we do on that area. It's a testament to the people's commitment really to what they're doing and not the company that they're working for. And I would just say that this is really important to people, what we do here at the site, and they're going to do it regardless of what the name on the front banner is for the company. As well, when we formed Covia, there was never any stop from the top down. Campbell, I was fortunate to work for under Unimin, and he didn't miss a beat. We just kept on marching forward.
That's really good to hear. We're always nervous when there's any kind of merger and acquisition, you know, chatter for any one of our members, because what we really want is to make sure that the employees continue to have access to those resources and to that really great program that's been established. So so that's nice to hear. I'm looking at my notes and I'm reminded, Kristen, you mentioned ISO in passing really quickly, but I think that what you're doing with ISO as a way to leverage effort is really innovative. And could you take a few minutes to talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I'm not an ISO expert, so I apologize if I can't speak too specifically on ISO, but ISO is an environmental management system program that we use at DTE, and most of our sites are certified under this ISO program. And part of that program is saying, one of the asks is, do you have any environmental projects? And so wildlife habitat fits perfectly in with, do you have an environmental project? So we can do things like pollinator gardens, you know, nesting boxes, whatever the site might be interested in. So when our ISO team goes to these sites and they say, you know, reach out to Kristen and do a wildlife habitat project, whatever you might be passionate about or interested in. And then once they wrap that into ISO, then our auditors check in on them, you know, every time they get audited internally. They ask, how's your wildlife habitat program? Where's your last certification documentation? Have you been doing your monitoring? And then, you know, another layer of that is that they do regular meetings with the site. The site has their own team, their environmental team, and they have a champion. And they're also asking, are you doing your monitoring? Did you put your monitoring in the website? So it's just all of these, you know, institutionalized checks and balances of, you know, if you're going to commit, you know, I know earlier, Josiane, you joked about the voluntoldism, but it's voluntary until you say you want to do it, and then we're going to make sure you do it. So it's a great system to make sure that, you know, yes, let's do it, and it's giving you an opportunity to do it, but also that if you're going to commit to being wildlife habitat certified, then we have a way to make sure that everything's getting done when it needs to get done.
We know that there's a lot of people out in the audience today representing companies and sites and facilities that have their ISO in place. And I think it's a good example, because I'm not sure that everyone thinks about using one to sustain the other. And I can also imagine that if there's a change of champions on site, that's now been mainstreamed, and it's much more difficult to push to the side and say, well, maybe we don't want to do that anymore.
And it also helps with changeovers, because if you have a new champion, or if you have new people on site, there's already documentation and paperwork on what we do and how we do it, and it's kind of part of the culture, so people just know what's expected of them. So that way, hopefully, not always, but most of the time when there's changeovers, it does help alleviate any issues that might come from that.
That's really great. So you mentioned monitoring, which I'm not sure is everyone's favorite task as part of a team and how to be engaged. Shane, what's your take on the favorite thing that the employees get to do as part of the programs?
I know the picture campaign every year for WEC is pretty interesting here, because folks it's almost a competition. What pictures can you take, and are yours a little bit better than mine? And those are shared widely throughout the site. And then if we're fortunate enough, and we have in the past got them to your level and they've been awarded, then that's a really big deal. That's a feather in people's cap. So I think lots of folks are running around the site in their daily duties, and they've all got cell phones and they've got cameras, and some folks put out trail cams, and it's a big deal. I think that's one of the favorite things. I know the turtle piece that I spoke about is really near and dear to people. We have, as I said, the 3 different types of turtles, and folks are really educated on it. Years ago, I'm told, when one of our ministries, so one of our government oversight bodies, came in and educated everyone on this, they shared some history on how they've been tracking turtles. And I was recently in one of those presentations, and people were really impressed to be educated on the species and its history and its method of reproducing, and it's pretty neat. So the turtles are a big deal. The duck boxes are a big deal. People, a lot of bird lovers here, so myself included, so we enjoy that. So several things are favorites.
That's good to hear. And Jamie, in your spotlight, is there a part of the spotlight that is being shared that people just resonate with more than other parts?
Yeah, I think that the education piece is something that everyone is really excited about. So being able to bring classrooms and scout groups into a site and just focus on what's been going on, where did they start, look what they're at now. That's always a highlight, I think, of every site, is to be able to share what they're doing with other groups, especially youth. But then, you talk about monitoring, and I think for our Creve Coeur site in St. Louis, long before I was even involved with the Habitat Council, I was part of our wildlife habitat team, unknowingly already participating in activities that would support the certification of that site, which was primarily a nest box monitoring. And we never had a shortage of people being willing to get out there, even just once a week, tromping through the woods in their work clothes with tennis shoes on, trying to take a peek into nest boxes. And it's probably the one thing that I hate to say suffered, but it's one part of the project that we had to put on hold this year. But on the other side of it, it's given our team lead in St. Louis an opportunity to be able to work with other individuals within the organization. So for example, monitoring has always been a struggle, how to get accurate and consistent data. And so she's been working with our breeding team that already has applications developed for monitoring, fields and crop growth. And so she's been working with that team to be able to develop an app for our monitors to use in St. Louis that would provide maps and locations of different boxes and gathering all the data that's necessary. So it's something that we hope to be able to roll out next year and potentially expand to other sites as well. So I think even though monitoring is not always a favorite, I think there's ways to make it engaging and fun.
That's you'll have to give us an update on that. That's really interesting that one part of the company is going to be offering their technology for the monitoring. I want to remind the attendees, feel free to submit questions. We have a few. I'm going to tackle another one, but we have a few more minutes to answer some specific questions. So one of the questions that came in pertains to, I think, a topic that everyone has touched on, which is engagement with schools. So employees really love to work with the kids, and things are changing. So have you found alternative ways to work with the schools now that they can't come on site? Have you started to explore some of these options and possibilities?
So I can't speak for our locations because I'm not sure the capacity at which they're able to continue during this time. And I know many of our schools, like for example, my daughter who's in 8th grade is, a virtual school until the end of the year. So I think it's probably, I can't say across the board that it's stopped, but I would assume that most schools wouldn't be engaging in any kind of on-site activity. I would be interested to encourage our sites to think outside the box and how can we virtually, provide some sort of program to schools without having to do it in person.
Mm-hmm.
So Josiane, if I may, we did have one of our events that we do every year is we do a big STEM event for I think there's 6th graders, girls in STEM, and we did it all virtually, and it was maybe in April or May at the start of the pandemic, and we did it all via Teams, and my colleagues did such a great job getting the teacher all set up with Teams and all the girls set up with Teams, and I gave I 2 hours presentation. We did good breaks in between, but on pollinators and habitat and different habitat types and things. And we did every 20 minutes, we did an EYL break or an Energize Your Life break where the kids got up and we stretched and just to kind of break up the monotony of talking. But they were better at Zoom than me. I was, I think I'm pretty good at technology, but they were using the raise your hand feature. They were doing muting themselves. I was so amazed at how much better maybe that even I am sometimes at the virtual stuff.
So and while you're talking about STEM, I do want to mention that the next session right after ours is on STEM. So if you're interested in what Kristen is talking about, there's a whole session about it as well. So Shane, is that a to-do on the list to try to find some ways to reconnect with the schools in the upcoming months?
Yeah, as Jamie said, unfortunately, due to these times that we're going through, most of it was suspended. But Kristen raised some good points, and I have a gentleman here, Cale Reeder, who is a good friend and a superior leader in the environmental area. If he's listening right now, I think he and I would probably put our heads together. And some of the notes I've taken from Kristen, I think there's something we can do there in that space. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So there's another question, and I'm going to read it out. Thank you, Jeff, for submitting. So what methods are you using to communicate and engage with employees regarding their overall programs and specifically to recruit for volunteer events? Anyone?
So even before COVID, we were relying heavily on technology. As I said, a lot of our sites are spread out throughout the whole state. So it's almost impossible for me to get to these sites maybe more than once a year, once every couple of years myself. So relying on technology, Microsoft Teams, we have a Teams group for all the wildlife habitat coordinators or people who are interested. SharePoint, we have a SharePoint page where I post articles. I share wildlife habitat webinars with everybody. Our corporate communications team is great. We do things like Pollinator Week every year where we do a lot of social media internally and externally about Pollinator Week. So hopping on those events that people might also be seeing in their regular daily lives and bringing that into work as well, like changing our social media banners internally and externally for whatever event. Making sure that it's a conversation that employees are seeing in the news, DTE news and things like that for recruitment. But yeah, we have always relied very heavily on technology because not everybody works at our downtown campus where I work. So making sure that it's accessible to everybody, that everybody feels included in some way, or everybody feels like there's an opportunity, as opposed to just doing events downtown.
That's great. And Shane, did you also have different tools that you're using?
Yeah, first, the two key people that are really the hinges on this that would help us figure out what the needs are would be Kale, as I mentioned before, Kale Reeder, and Michelle Oxley, my colleague down in the States. So when it comes to ministerial oversight, sometimes the projects come out of a requirement that might be government driven, if you understand what I mean. For instance, we're going through a modernization process right now where we're maximizing the site, one of the production facilities, and minimizing it at the other, which will have a positive net benefit environmentally. But out of that permitting process, there's things that we are prompted from those two colleagues that I mentioned to start projects, and how we manage water, how we regrass areas, tree planting, those kinds of things. So sometimes we can piggyback a project and get volunteers to help with that process. So they would be the ones that would help us develop that. The other way is just by, as I mentioned earlier, people watching and looking and living in this environment. They might come up with a good idea on their own. Barn swallows are a protected species here, and folks watch those and they look for them. They want to see if there's a nest in their haul truck in the morning when they do their walk around, and if there is, that raises a flag. And there are other things like that come along that lead to projects.
That's really cool, really cool. So there's another question that came in, and it's about innovation. So have any of you thought about engaging non-traditional employees, i.e. contractors, employees from your suppliers, and others that are maybe in your world but that are not directly tied to you?
I'll speak to that. With the modernization process, project that I mentioned, we have a lot of contractors. We might have upwards of 100 contractors on site in a very tight area. When they come on, they have to go through obviously an onboarding for safety and many, many other training pieces, not the least of which is species at risk. So we take them through an education process of species at risk, which you can see when you're in the room with them, the eyes are open, and these folks are welcoming the education. And then it heightens their awareness when they're working on the site. I mean, working here on this site versus downtown Toronto on a building site is completely different set of challenges, different hurdles to go over. We really watch the environment that we work in here. As I said, we live in it, we work in it. So we locally are very aware of it. It's nice to bring them in and have them raised up through that process.
Yeah. Jami or Kristen, is one of you working with your suppliers as kind of the next level of engagement with employees?
Yeah, so I want to shout out my coworker Greg, who's done a great job of working with our suppliers. And at DTE, we like to do business with people who share our values, and biodiversity and wildlife habitat is one of our values. And so, in the past couple of years, we've kind of had this ask of our suppliers, if here's Wildlife Habitat Council, here's what they're doing, here's what we're doing with them. Is this something that you might be interested in doing? And we've had a number of suppliers who have taken this call to action and created projects, not only at their own properties, but we had a site who did a project, or a company who did a project on Belle Isle, which is a state park here in Detroit. And so not only are their employees getting involved, but they're giving back to the community with a beautiful garden that they're going to be able to utilize. So, just if you haven't thought about engaging your suppliers, I would highly recommend it, because they might just not know that this is something that they can get involved in, and then you're sharing this opportunity for their employees to get engaged and their company, to have another feather in their cap. So I think it's just, bringing them along with you, if you can, is the best way to go about it.
It certainly has a ripple effect, right? DTE doing something, and then if you can get to 5 or 6 suppliers, and then maybe they then transfer that to some of their other clients, right? And then we're kind of all doing it. We only have a couple of minutes, so I will take the last question. And Jami, I will ask you, what is your elevator speech when you have to convince a colleague or a new manager that having employees connect to nature is worthwhile?
Yeah, I think it's evident in the numbers. So we've got 39 sites that are certified globally, hundreds of employees that are engaged, and that's just the efforts through Wildlife Habitat Council. I think it's, especially given the current circumstances, no one can argue with being able to get outside and have time with nature. So yeah, I would just point to the incredible success that we've had with our Habitat Council sites. How it's regenerated this passion in people to be able to be part of something that's bigger than themselves, and then just again continuing to just scream it out into the world, using all those, like Kristen said, using technology to just elevate the message is what we can do.
And we'll continue from our end at WHC to also amplify that message. I think for all of the companies, all of the programs, we're so very proud of the work that's being done that it's always our privilege to be able to talk about it. So we're running out of time. So many questions, so much impactful work that the three of you are shepherding at the sites, within the companies. So I want to thank you for sharing the secrets to your success, because it definitely is a successful endeavor, and I know it will be helpful to many, many people in our audience today. Shane, Jami, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today. Your contribution and your time, because this is not the first time we all chat, is much appreciated. I want to also thank our sponsor, Ernst Conservation Seed, for allowing us to do this today. Please join us again here at 2:45 p.m. Eastern. So that's in half an hour for a great session hosted by my colleague, Rob Campbell. And Rob will be joined by panelists from BASF, Ontario Power Generation, and Summit Material. And you need to once again exit the screen to go back to the WHC Connect portal to access the session. I do hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josiane.